So I'm going to just sort of give you a few minutes of sort of who I am and how I came to be here this morning. And if I say that, when I said it was a bit of a whirlwind, it really was. I started work in the area of environmental education, several decades ago, working as a primary school teacher. And a decade ago, we were not where we are now. A decade ago, this was not a conversation that people were willing to have. It was sort of rather put on a shelf and was gathering dust, but it was something that obviously those of us in education and those of us working within the environment knew was not going to go away. It was only going to get more urgent. The needs to address it were only going to get more pressing. So I was close to being able to retire after 30 years of in-classroom teaching. And I overlapped my last few years of teaching with setting up an environmental education program in the town that I was teaching in the hope that we could set an example. And we have gone, the first 5 years, I won't lie, it was jolly hard work, and there were moments when we wondered if anybody else was going to join in. But bit by bit, people began to understand what we were trying to do, and the mood and the conversation around ecology and the environment and the need to take responsible action in our own lives, not just wait for somebody else to do it, became more and more obvious. So we're now at the end of 10 years. We set this up in 2011, and I'll show you a little bit more about what the it is in a moment. But suffice it to say that me being here is as a result of a friend and colleague and now volunteer who lives in my community, who runs a natural business network. She came across this festival of construction. I'm usually too busy running around trying to make things happen, and I'm not always aware of some of the things I should be aware of. So Sue brought this to my attention. A colleague, Anna, who heads up our PR and publicity and who has been so important in just making sure that we could be here today, got in touch with Catherine. We found out a bit more about it. And I think, Catherine, this was just last week. And since last week, we have been doing the usual day-to-day jam-packed meeting with people, planting, looking after the plantings in the wood, working with volunteers, inducting more people, writing funding bids. And the fact that we thought this was so important to have this opportunity is the reason why we have squeezed a quart into a pint pot. And this comes by way of a bit of an apology. It's not the most polished presentation that I've ever put together, and it's definitely not going to be the most polished presentation you'll see today and over the week. But we hope at least it gives you food for thought, and that it inspires you to get in touch, and hopefully we can spread the concept of what we're doing and help to create more of the same. So that's a little bit about me, and that's a little bit about my state of confusion. So here we go. Let's see what happens. Okay. So it occurred to me that before I went any further, I sort of thought I need to sort of put out a question. So what is it, the problem that we set out to address? I suspect that everyone here today, has a common thread running through. How do we move forwards? How do we preserve a way of life that we all enjoy without further destruction to our habitat, the world in which we live? We'll all be coming at it from different angles, but I think we're all coming from the same starting point, which is, as people, we live in settlements. Those settlements are invasive and potentially destructive. So how do we address this? And within the built environment, obviously, one of the things that we hear a lot about and are trying to do more about is to introduce green spaces. And traditionally, we think of green spaces in cities and towns as parkland. And certainly in where we live, in our part of the world, in the more materialized and wealthy sort of Western countries, many of us live in cities, many of us live in urban environments. If you go out to the more rural continents in the world, people are much more connected to the natural world. They still live by it. They're very connected to it, and they don't, obviously there are built environments in those places, and they are now experiencing the same sort of conflicts. How do we retain a connection to the natural world, which is essential for our health and well-being, but is also essential for our understanding of why we need to do more to protect the environment that is our home. And all the continents around the world that are becoming wealthier and more people moving into urban environments will be experiencing the same problems. How do we live in safe and secure urban environments that also respect the natural world, and not just in a parkland way? So I think that's where our work is taking us, is how can we rethink again our relationship to the natural world, so it goes beyond green spaces and human beings at the top and the fore, and human beings wanting that connection to nature. How do we resolve that conflict? So this is an aerial view of the edge of Andover, which is where we live, good old Google Earth. Now, the houses that you can see, it's actually to the south. It's the top left-hand corner of the image, but it's actually to the south as the compass goes. That's not been superimposed. That is a new conurbation of thousands of houses that has been built on the northern edge of Andover. So Andover itself, the core town, is beyond that and further south. Andover was a designated London overspill area in the 60s and has had to accept many housing developments. It's essentially a rural market town, but it has been developed over the decades as a commuter town, I guess, somewhere where houses could be built. Now, one of the houses that you see in this image were built on prime farmland, high-level stewardship managed farmland, mainly because that's where the space was, because Andover is just surrounded by farmland. And also it has very good connections to transport links. So we're right on the edge of the 303, which feeds into the M3 and M4. So the field that you can see in the center of the picture, which has got two names, Diamond Wood and Harmony Woods, is the project that we set out to do. It was the last field that belonged to the estate, and we worked with them, and they were very keen that we should go ahead and run the project. So discussions were held. We worked with the local authority, a difficult partnership, but one that we are sort of making work. And this 44-acre site was acquired. The reason for it was that I wanted, as a teacher, I could see environmental education just being thrown out, sort of baby went out with bathwater. The Sustainable Development Commission was removed, and all of the work that it had put in place, including a sustainable schools programme, which had been running for 2005 and was due to run till 2020, it was decided it wasn't needed. So it was removed, and schools no longer had to comply with it. However, some of us realised that the future was not going to change, and we were going to have to deal with an environmental crisis. So we thought, well, tree planting is great. How can we engage all the children? Well, we don't just want the usual suspects, we want all of them. So if we were to approach all the head teachers of all of the schools in the town and put the idea to them that we should set up a community organisation that would work with all of the schools in the town, and we would support them to run an environmental project, which was the creation of a new wood. So this is a 44-acre new wood, which was started in 2012. It's one of the Queen's Diamond Woods. And we set aside a 12-acre block, which is the bit called Harmony Woods, which was due to be planted year on year for a decade with all the children in the town. Then we worked out that if we took a year group from every school in the town and surrounding villages, that would be 1,000 children a year, which would mean we needed space for 10,000 trees. And at the end of a decade, we would collaboratively have planted urban woodland, and the schools and the children and the wider community would be connected to this. It wouldn't just have landed like many developments do, but they would be connected to it through planting it and through conserving it. And at the end of it, we would have it facilitated so that it could also be used as an outdoor classroom and field study centre, as well as a place for volunteering and learning and sharing the work that we've done in the project. So that's what we've done. And we started it in 2011. We put trees into nursery beds in all of the schools. And over the 10 years that followed, 2012 till now, we have transported, we fundraised to do it. We transported 1,000 children, their teachers, family, friends and volunteers to the wood to keep planting it. So the green space, just to interpret it a little bit more, that is next to it is a sports field that is part of this massive housing area. This is a fraction that you can see. I think there must be between 3,000 and 4,000 houses that have been sort of put in Andover and in the last 5-10 years, and half of them are on this site here. And what's really interesting, I think, and is the thread that I would like to have running through sort of our work, is the difference between managed green space and a natural and wild green space. And here we've got classic examples. So the housing estate has got little pockets of green in it. Then you've got a large area of green space, which is used for people to use. It's their sports field. And then we have a wonderful wood to the other side, which is surrounded by deer fence and which visitors think is a dog park because it's got fencing around it. So the unexpected education and engagement with the community that we have had to manage is people's expectations of how they can use this green space. So I think that the thrust of the work that we do and I hope where it becomes relevant to this Festival of Construction is that we need to think about how we can bring wild spaces into our towns, and how, or at least on the edge of them, as this one is, of a decent enough size that will therefore invite in a real diversity of species. Because our urban parks and our sports field are fairly denuded of diversity. Whereas if we let nature go, that's when diversity moves in and that's when diversity grows. But we as humans need to understand how to be in it. And if we learn how to be in it, our respect for the natural world will grow. And we, I think, will then have a generation of young people, hopefully those of you in the audience, who will come to understand that we have to be in nature in different ways. And that if we're going to avoid a deepening of the environmental crisis, we all need to be engaged in the wild spaces and not just the urban parklands. So this is what we do. We invite 1,000 children through their schools every year to come and plant wood. This is the 2019 planting. We've got one more year left of the decade, and then we will be pretty much done. So there are, you know, it's a three-pronged approach with nature in the middle. We educate young people from all ages, right the way up, from the youngest to college students, and we're now getting university students and land-based college students coming to us and wanting to get involved, because there are very few places for them to practice what they have been learning. So we now have a resource for young people to come back to and gain experience and then go out into the world and become conservators and conservationists. So we've got tree planting. We also run Plant for the Planet, which is an engagement program with the United Nations, where we train, it's peer training, young people on young people about climate justice, and it's all done through tree planting. We obviously have community days because the community needs to look after the wood, and we run other programs as well in the town. So we're connected to three important institutions, international organizations. So we work with Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots program. We have connected with a Costa Rican group called Fundación Corcovado, and we train on an annual basis, except for 2020, about 50 new climate justice ambassadors through the Plant for the Planet program. We have about 200 of them, young ambassadors in Andover, and although not many of them are proactively active, we do have a growing group of young people who are becoming leaders in this as a result of the work that we have been able to do with them. So these are just our aims, if you like. It basically says we need to look after the biodiversity of our environment. We'll do that through tree planting and all the ecosystems that exist within a wood, and we will work with people to help them understand their connection to nature and their role within it, that they're not separate, they're part of it, and all our actions impact for better or worse. So we have got, you know, we know that we have a climate and ecological crisis. We know that we have a set of guidelines, which are the SDGs. A solution that we think should be part of all urban planning is a wild space, urban woodland that is not curated, that is there for people to learn, that invites biodiversity in, and just exists for all, but we have to learn to be in it differently. And then by creating urban woodlands, we are creating spaces for young people to come into and to learn and to further their careers and to develop careers. So obviously these are the crises that we're all very familiar with. These are our human solutions. So we have SDGs, we have 17 goals. It's a to-do list for the planet, and it's not about somebody else doing it for you. It's about all of us having to play a part. This is something that I'm sure everyone is familiar with. If not, it's a simple Google search, and I'm sure this will thread throughout the week's work. If you want a slightly more user-friendly image, this is quite nice. I don't think it actually illustrates sort of our Western towns and cities maybe as much as it might, but at least it's a neat illustration of the sort of things that those SDGs are relating to. Now, of course, governments are now realizing that they have to take action on this. It isn't enough to just talk about it. We have to do something. So we have a declared climate change emergency, or declared climate emergency. Probably a lot of the local authorities that we live in, you as students will be you'll be living somewhere. Your life will be organized by politicians on the council, and quite likely your council will also have declared its own climate emergency and will be taking steps to address it. One of the ways that central government has set out to address the climate crisis and the environmental crisis is to create a blueprint, a 25-year plan for the environment. A large part of this is about increasing woodland. This was published 5 years or more after we had set out to do what we were doing. So we're quite proud of the fact that we thought about connecting people to a piece of land through tree planting before it became a popular idea. So we hope that we can help and support people to follow these ideas and solutions. In terms of the SDGs that relate to the work that we specifically do, it's definitely about education. It's definitely about the built environment, taking climate action. It's very much about life on land. And it's very much about working in partnerships with each other. And interestingly, the concept of learning how to live our lives in harmony with nature, and the children called the wood Harmony Woods, so we got that name down 10 years back. But the idea of living in harmony with nature is enshrined in the SDG that is about consumption, interestingly. So it's about living our lives and what we do in our daily lives, and making choices that are going to have that are going to minimize our impact on the environment. So this was the plan that we came up with 5 years ago. We called it the Great Growing Project because we wanted to grow things, and we wanted to grow everything that we did. If we sort of take the idea of urban forests, when you've gone through your GCSEs, when you've gone through your A levels, you may or may not go on to college, thinking about the built environment, but the built environment will hopefully include a greater understanding of the environment and the nature that is on which we depend. So, for instance, if the country is going to be planting sort of hundreds of thousands more trees, in 20 years' time, somebody's got to look after them. So there's going to be a real skills gap unless we look at the sort of careers that can be worked at within forestry. So this, and if you have a piece of urban woodland, you've then got a training ground for young people, both to get experience in, is it something that will be a career for me? And if it is, to come back and get work experience in. Obviously, conservation itself takes many, many forms, but environmental education, environmental consultancy, environmental conservation, ecology, these are areas that's a growing market for training and employment, and the whole of the construction industry, the whole of the built environment, everyone that runs a business in it or builds or contributes to it will be looking for ecological consultants and environmental consultants to help them make the best decisions that they can. Well-being is a huge factor. So this is our Harmony Woods. This is, you can see the trees in the background there now, 9 years old. Silver birches are reaching for the sky. We are right next to sort of cut grass sports field where biodiversity is thin on the ground. But you walk through a gate and you have this. And this is such a different world to be in. And again, the health and well-being benefits for a town are huge. I mean, solutions, they come thick and fast. You may be hearing about something called the Miyawaki method. So this is about planting a lot of trees in a very small space. It's a cracking idea. It's very similar to what we did, but we've done it over slightly larger spaces than Miyawaki proposed. We don't know if it'll work in terms of biodiversity. We know it'll produce trees. Will it give us the biodiversity we need? Who knows? But we need young people to be coming up with solutions, to be problem solvers and challenge takers. Will this work? Let's have a go. Let's research it. Maybe it won't, but unless we give things a go, we won't know. So will Miyawaki lead to this? Our wood certainly has. So this was a farmer's field a number of years ago. 2012, it was just growing kale. Now it's home to endangered species, many wildflower plants. You know, what you see in this picture is in the wood. And one of our volunteers at the bottom, young was a pupil that I taught many years ago. He's now gone through training and education in this, and he's come back into it and wanting to lead in it. So we mustn't forget that we as human beings are part of this natural world. We just need to help it out a bit. And finally, we do actually have a sustainable build, just to bring it right back up to where we, you know, where the theme of the week. So we have just had timber felled on a nearby estate. We're going to be working with the Carpenters Fellowship, who will hand process those timbers to build a woodland classroom and community space. These are the designs for that, for which we have planning permission. Building is going to start next month. We will be combining sort of traditional design with, modern design with traditional low impact building techniques. We do have opportunities for anyone who happens to live in the Hampshire, Wiltshire, Berkshire borders area, for young people to come and get involved and work alongside the Carpenters Fellowship and give this a go. So if you do happen to live in our area and you want to sort of find out what this is about, please get in touch. And if you don't, all this has come from that single idea of let's plant a wood together. You know, you will have tree planting in your area, and it will be going on. Whether or not you get to be involved in it is largely down to the adults in your area. So if you don't feel that you're being involved and you would like to be, you know, speak to your teacher, connect to local groups, definitely speak to the local council and talk to us, because we've made it work. And Andover wasn't renowned for being, you know, green and full of solutions, but we think we've come up with one. So if we can do it, honestly, we truly believe anybody can, and we would love to help people along the way. Anna has put this together. I've rushed through it. I've probably gone terribly over. I hope it's been useful. I hope it's inspired you to maybe think a bit differently. So that's sort of me over and
thank you so much, Wendy. Sorry, thank you. That was just brilliant. That was lovely.